The morning sky over New Eden turned from peaceful blue to violent orange in the span of 3 heartbeats. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing crop reports when the first plasma bolt struck the colony's northern sector, vaporizing the medical center where her daughter worked as a nurse. The emergency sirens began their wailing song of death as more crimson streaks carved through the atmosphere. Sarah sprinted from the administrative building toward the communications array, her military training kicking in despite 15 years of peaceful farming. The colony had been humanity's pride, a self-sufficient settlement on Kepler 442b that proved humans could thrive beyond Earth's cradle. 200,000 souls called this place home, including families who had never known war. The alien ships hung in the sky like metallic vultures, their hulls bearing the distinctive triple circle markings of the Zephyrian Collective. Sarah had read about them in intelligence briefings during her service days. They were one of the galaxy's newer powers, aggressive expansionists who viewed younger species as obstacles to their dominion. Emergency transmission to Terra Command. Sarah barked into the comm system as another wave of plasma fire turned the eastern farmlands into glass. The operator, a young man named Marcus, worked frantically at the controls while tears streamed down his face. His wife had been in that medical center. "Captain, I'm getting through, but the signal's weak," Marcus reported, his voice cracking. "The orbital relay stations are taking heavy fire." Through the reinforced windows, Sarah watched civilian transports desperately trying to evacuate the outer settlements. Most never made it. The Zephyrian fighters moved with predatory grace, picking off the unarmed vessels with casual precision. This wasn't a military engagement, it was extermination. "Terra Command, this is New Eden Colony," Sarah transmitted, knowing these might be humanity's last words from this world. "We are under attack by Zephyrian forces. Massive casualties. They're not targeting military installations. They're systematically destroying everything. This is genocide." The static-filled response came through after an agonizing delay. "New Eden, this is Admiral Rodriguez at Terra Command. We're reading your telemetry. Fleet elements are en route, but you're 7 light-years out. We can't reach you in time." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. 7 light-years might as well have been 7,000. Even the fastest human ships would take weeks to arrive, and New Eden had minutes, maybe hours. "Understood, Admiral. We'll try to hold position and gather intelligence on their capabilities." She paused, watching a Zephyrian cruiser position itself directly over the capital district. "Tell our families we died fighting for humanity's future, Sarah." "Wait," the Admiral's voice cut through the static. But then the signal died completely, as the communications array exploded in a tower of flame. The Zephyrian ground assault began at noon. Their warriors moved like liquid death through the streets, their powered armor shimmering with energy shields that deflected the colonists' desperate return fire. Sarah had managed to organize a resistance from the remaining security forces and armed civilians, but their weapons were designed for peacekeeping, not war. She crouched behind an overturned vehicle with a handful of survivors, watching the aliens methodically execute civilians. The Zephyrians stood nearly 8 feet tall, their elongated limbs moving with unnatural precision. Their faces, visible through translucent helmet visors, showed no emotion, no anger, no satisfaction, just cold efficiency. "Captain, why are they doing this?" whispered Elena Vasquez, the colony's chief engineer. Her hands shook as she clutched an ancient projectile rifle. "We never threatened them. Hell, we barely knew they existed." Sarah had been wondering the same thing. New Eden was rich in resources but hardly irreplaceable. The galaxy held thousands of similar worlds. This felt personal, deliberate, like the Zephyrians were sending a message. Her answer came when she intercepted a fragment of alien communication. Her universal translator, designed for diplomatic contact, managed to parse enough of their language to reveal the truth. The Zephyrians weren't just claiming territory, they were establishing dominance. New Eden was a demonstration, a warning to every species in this sector that human expansion would not be tolerated. As the sun set on New Eden's final day, Sarah found herself in the colony's small museum, surrounded by artifacts that told the story of human achievement. Pictures of Earth's blue skies, models of the first interstellar ships, children's artwork depicting their dreams of the stars. All of it would be ash by morning. She activated her personal recorder, knowing that somehow this message had to reach Earth. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, final log from New Eden Colony. The Zephyrian Collective has declared war on humanity. whether we know it or not. They're not just taking our world, they're erasing our existence here. Every building, every monument, every trace that humans ever lived on this planet. Outside, the sounds of dying grew quieter. The Zephyrians were efficient killers and their work was nearly complete. They think we're weak because we chose peace. Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the horror around her. They think one massacre will teach humanity to stay in our corner of the galaxy, grateful for whatever scraps they allow us. She paused, hearing footsteps approaching the museum. They're wrong. The door burst open and Zephyrian warriors flowed into the room like a dark tide. Sarah stood slowly, meeting their alien gaze with human defiance. "You want to know what makes humans different?" she asked, though she knew they couldn't understand her words. "We remember our dead, and we make their killers pay." The plasma bolt that ended her life also destroyed the museum's exhibits, but not before her final transmission burst toward the hidden relay satellite Sarah had activated with her last breath. The signal raced through hyperspace, carrying the truth of New Eden's fate toward Earth and the human colonies beyond. The Zephyrians spent 3 more days systematically obliterating every trace of human presence on the planet. They melted the cities, poisoned the farmlands, and even destroyed the orbital infrastructure. When they finally departed, Kepler 442b was nothing but scorched rock and toxic atmosphere. But they had made one critical error. In their arrogance, they assumed that destroying New Eden would terrify humanity into submission. They couldn't comprehend that for humans, the murder of innocents wasn't a deterrent. It was a declaration of war that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Admiral Maria Rodriguez stood in the war room beneath Geneva, staring at the holographic display that showed the smoldering remains of what had once been humanity's crown jewel colony. The silence in the room was deafening, 50 of Earth's top military and political leaders trying to process the unthinkable. "Show me the transmission again," Rodriguez commanded, her voice barely above a whisper. The recording played for the 7th time in the past hour. Captain Chen's final words echoed through speakers that had once carried messages of exploration and hope. Now they carried only grief and rage. 200,000 souls, muttered General Harrison, head of Colonial Defense. Gone in 18 hours. They didn't even demand surrender. President Elena Vasquez, no relation to the engineer who died on New Eden, leaned forward in her chair. "Admiral, what do we know about these Zephyrians? Our intelligence on them is minimal." Rodriguez pulled up another display showing scattered data from deep space reconnaissance. They emerged from the galactic core region about 30 years ago. Highly advanced technology, aggressive expansion, but they've mostly targeted uninhabited systems or primitive civilizations. We're the first spacefaring species they've hit this hard. "Why us?" asked Dr. James Wright, the Secretary of Science and Technology. "What makes humanity special enough to warrant genocide?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Lisa Park, head of Xenological Studies, had been quietly analyzing the attack patterns. "It's not about us specifically. It's about what we represent." All eyes turned to her as she activated her own hologram. It showed human expansion over the past century, dozens of colonies spreading outward from Earth in an ever-widening sphere. "Look at our growth pattern," Park explained. "We're expanding faster than any species in recorded galactic history. Most civilizations take millennia to establish a dozen colonies. We've built 47 in less than a century. The Zephyrians see us as a future threat. So they decided to strangle us in the cradle," President Vasquez concluded grimly. Admiral Rodriguez felt something cold settle in her chest. She had spent 30 years in the service, rising through ranks during humanity's golden age of exploration. She had believed that humanity's greatest enemies would be distance and the void itself, not alien hatred. "Madam President, we need to make a decision," Rodriguez said. "Our long-range sensors show Zephyrian fleet movements toward 3 more colonies: Haven, Prosperity, and New Moscow. They're not stopping with New Eden." The room erupted in urgent conversations, but President Vasquez raised her hand for silence. "What are our options, Admiral?" Rodriguez had been dreading this question, because the honest answer was terrifying. "Militarily, we're outmatched. Our fleet was designed for exploration and defense against pirates, not galactic warfare. The Zephyrians have been building for conquest for decades. So we surrender?" General Harrison's voice carried bitter sarcasm. "Abandon our colonies and hope they leave Earth alone? No. Rodriguez replied firmly. We fight. But we need to be smart about it. She manipulated the hologram to show fleet positions across human space. We have advantages they don't expect. Our ships are faster in hyperspace. We prioritized speed for exploration. Our manufacturing base is distributed across multiple worlds. And most importantly, they think they've already won. Dr. Wright leaned forward. What do you mean? They spent 3 days obliterating New Eden to send a message, Rodriguez explained. That's the behavior of conquerors who expect submission. They're not prepared for total war. President Vasquez stood slowly. Admiral, you're talking about mobilizing our entire civilization for war. Do you understand what that means? Humanity has been at peace for over a century. Madam President, with respect, peace ended the moment they fired on New Eden. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of command decisions that would echo through history. The question is whether humanity dies as martyrs or fights as warriors. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Ministers argued about economic impacts. Generals discussed tactical realities. And diplomats desperately sought alternatives to war. But Rodriguez knew the decision had been made the moment they watched Captain Chen's final transmission. When the votes were tallied, the result was unanimous. Humanity would fight. The mobilization began within hours. Every shipyard in human space received emergency construction orders. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with military hardware. The peaceful colonies that had focused on farming and research suddenly found themselves building weapons factories and training soldiers. Rodriguez established her command center on Luna Station, where she could coordinate with both Earth's industrial base and the colonial fleets. Her first strategic decision surprised everyone. Instead of massing forces to defend the threatened colonies, she ordered an immediate evacuation. You're abandoning them? General Harrison demanded during a heated strategy session. I'm saving them. Rodriguez replied calmly. Haven, Prosperity, and New Moscow can't be defended with what we have now, but their populations can be relocated to more defensible positions while we build our strength. The evacuations were chaotic but successful. When Zephyrian fleets arrived at the 3 targeted colonies, they found empty worlds and booby-trapped infrastructure. The aliens destroyed the abandoned settlements with typical efficiency, then departed, assuming their message had been received. They were wrong. While the Zephyrians celebrated their easy victories, human space transformed itself into something the galaxy had never seen. Peaceful merchants became arms dealers. Scientists abandoned research projects to design new weapons. Children too young to fight learned to build ammunition. The transformation wasn't just military, it was psychological. Humanity had spent generations believing in the nobility of exploration and peaceful contact. Now they learned a harder truth. Sometimes survival required becoming something terrible. Rodriguez watched the changes from her command center, feeling both pride and sorrow. In 6 months, humanity had built a war machine that would have been unimaginable before New Eden. But they had also lost something precious, their innocence. The first human warships rolled out of the shipyards on a cold Tuesday morning. They bore names like Vengeance, Retribution, and New Eden's Fury. Gone were the elegant exploration vessels with names like Hope and Discovery. These ships were built for one purpose, to make the galaxy burn. As Rodriguez reviewed the fleet manifests, her aide brought news that changed everything. Long-range scouts had discovered something that made the war suddenly winnable: the location of the Zephyrian home system. How certain are we? Rodriguez asked, studying the stellar cartography data. 97%, Admiral. The hyperspace trails all lead back to this system. Heavy industrial signatures, massive fleet concentrations. It's definitely their primary base. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since New Eden burned. The Zephyrians had made their second critical error. They had shown humanity where they lived. Begin Phase 2 of the mobilization, she ordered. And send a message to all human colonies: New Eden will be avenged. The factory floor on Titan stretched beyond the horizon, a cathedral of steel and fire where humanity forged its instruments of vengeance. Maria Santos had been a civilian engineer 18 months ago, designing water purification systems for colonial settlements. Now she supervised the construction of weapons that could crack continents. Production report, Santos. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system as she toured the facility. The Admiral looked older now, her hair gone silver under the stress of transforming humanity into a war machine. We're exceeding targets across all categories, Maria replied, gesturing toward the assembly lines. Antimatter warheads, hyperspace torpedoes, and the new kinetic bombardment platforms. The Mars shipyards are launching 2 destroyers every week, and the belt miners are providing more raw materials than we ever imagined possible. Rodriguez nodded, but Maria could see the weight in her eyes. This industrial miracle came at a cost that extended far beyond economics. Earth's children were growing up in a world where their playground games involved fighting aliens instead of exploring stars. The transformation had been swift and terrifying. When humanity decided to fight, they didn't just build weapons, they became weapons. Every aspect of their civilization reorganized around a single purpose, making the Zephyrians pay for New Eden. "Show me the new ships," Rodriguez requested. They walked through the facility toward the testing bays, passing workers who labored around the clock. The Titan factories never slept now, their lights visible from Jupiter's moons like artificial stars. Maria had heard similar reports from every major industrial center: Ceres, Europa, the orbital platforms around Saturn. Humanity was consuming its own future to build instruments of war. The prototype vessel waiting in the testing bay represented everything humanity had learned about violence in the past year. The UES Retribution wasn't elegant like the old exploration ships. It was a brutal wedge of armor and weapons designed for one purpose. "She's beautiful," Rodriguez murmured, running her hand along the ship's hull. The Admiral's definition of beauty had changed since New Eden. "The specifications are beyond what we thought possible," Maria explained. "Quantum-enhanced armor that can absorb directed energy weapons, hyperspace drives that can jump directly into enemy formations, and the main gun—" She paused, still awed by what they had created. "The main gun? We call it the Planet Killer. Antimatter warhead with a yield of 50 megatons delivered by hyperspace torpedo. It can crack a moon and turn a planet's surface into molten glass." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Our ancestors would be horrified by what we've become." "Our ancestors never watched their children burned alive by aliens," Maria replied simply. The tour continued through sections that showcased humanity's terrifying adaptability. The Bioweapons Division had created viruses specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology. The Psychological Warfare Department developed strategies to break alien morale. The Intelligence Section had learned to think like predators, identifying weaknesses in enemy formations. But the most frightening change was in the people themselves. Maria had watched gentle scientists become efficient killers, seen peaceful farmers volunteer for suicide missions, observed children playing games that involved exterminating entire alien species. Humanity had discovered something dark within itself and embraced it completely. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the front lines," announced a communications officer. The message came from Captain James Kirk, no relation to the ancient fictional character, though his parents had shared that story's optimism about humanity's future. Now Captain Kirk commanded a flotilla of raiders harassing Zephyrian supply lines. "Admiral Rodriguez, this is Kirk reporting from the Centauri raid. We hit 3 of their supply convoys and a mining station. No human casualties. Complete destruction of enemy assets." His voice carried the flat efficiency that all their officers had developed, also confirming intelligence reports. The Zephyrians are withdrawing from the outer systems. They're consolidating closer to their home territory. Rodriguez frowned. "Are they preparing for defense or planning something else?" "Unknown, ma'am. But we captured some of their computer cores. The translation teams are working on them now." After the transmission ended, Rodriguez turned to Maria with a troubled expression. "They're not stupid. They know we're coming for them." The answer to Rodriguez's concerns came 3 days later when the translation teams finished their work. The captured Zephyrian communications revealed a strategy that chilled everyone who read it. The aliens were preparing to exterminate every human colony simultaneously, using a coordinated strike that would leave Earth isolated and defenseless. "They call it the final cleansing," reported Dr. Sarah Kim, head of the translation project. "According to these files, they're massing fleets at 3 staging areas. When they attack, they'll hit every human world at once. No evacuation, no surrender, just complete annihilation." The war council that followed was the most critical in human history. 47 colony worlds depended on the decisions made in that sterile conference room beneath Luna's surface. How long do we have? President Vasquez asked. Based on their fleet movements, 6 weeks, Dr. Kim replied. Maybe 8 if we're lucky. Our forces aren't ready for a defensive action on that scale, General Harrison reported grimly. We have the ships, but not the coordination. Fighting on 47 fronts simultaneously would be suicide. Rodriguez had been staring at the tactical displays, her mind racing through possibilities. Suddenly, she straightened with the look of someone who had just seen the solution to an impossible problem. We're not going to defend, she announced. The room erupted in protests, but Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. Think about it. They're pulling their fleets away from their home systems to mass for this attack. That leaves their core territory vulnerable. You're talking about abandoning our colonies, General Harrison accused. I'm talking about winning the war, Rodriguez replied firmly. While they're destroying our outer settlements, we strike at their heart. We take out their homeworld, their industrial base, their command structure. When their fleets return from their final cleansing, they'll find their civilization in ruins. The plan that emerged from that meeting was audacious beyond belief. Humanity would sacrifice its colonies to destroy its enemy's ability to wage war. It required gambling everything on a single decisive battle, and accepting that millions of human civilians would die while their military struck at alien worlds. The colonists will never evacuate in time, President Vasquez pointed out. You're asking me to sacrifice 47 worlds. I'm asking you to save humanity, Rodriguez replied. If we lose this war, Earth dies too. But if we win... She paused, looking around the room at faces that had grown hard over months of preparation for war. If we win, we make sure no alien species ever threatens humanity again. The vote was closer this time, but the result was the same. Humanity would gamble everything on vengeance. As the fleets prepared for departure, Maria Santos found herself assigned to the flagship UES New Eden's Vengeance. Standing in the engineering section surrounded by weapons of unprecedented destruction, she thought about the colony ship her grandfather had helped design decades ago, a vessel meant to carry hope to the stars. Now, humanity carried only fire and fury. But sometimes, Maria reflected, fire was exactly what the galaxy needed to burn away the darkness. The first battle of the Human-Zephyrian War began not with thunderous explosions, but with silence. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of UES New Eden's Vengeance, watching her fleet emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian home system. 200 ships materialized like ghosts, their running lights dark, their weapons charged. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced Captain Torres from the tactical station. The young officer had volunteered for this mission knowing it was likely suicide. They all had. Through the viewport, Rodriguez could see their target, Zeph Prime, the alien homeworld that commanded an empire spanning dozens of systems. The planet hung in space like a jewel, its cities glowing with the light of 1 billion inhabitants who had no idea that death was coming for them. Communications? Any word from the colonies? Rodriguez asked, though she dreaded the answer. Final transmissions came in an hour ago, replied Lieutenant Chen, daughter of the captain who died on New Eden. The Zephyrian fleets have begun their attacks. Haven is gone. Prosperity is under bombardment. The others... She couldn't finish. Rodriguez closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 47 worlds pressing down on her shoulders. Millions of humans were dying while she led their fleets away from home. History would either call her humanity's savior or its greatest traitor. Admiral, enemy patrol ships are approaching our position, reported the sensor operator. Begin the operation, Rodriguez commanded. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each targeting critical infrastructure in the Zephyrian system. Rodriguez led the main force toward Zeph Prime itself, while smaller task forces moved against the orbital shipyards and the military base on the system's 4th planet. The first Zephyrian defenders were swept aside like leaves in a hurricane. Human ships, built for speed and firepower, tore through alien formations with ruthless efficiency. The planet-killer weapons that Maria Santos had helped design turned enemy cruisers into expanding clouds of plasma. But the Zephyrians recovered quickly from their initial surprise. Emergency alarms screamed across their homeworld as defense fleets emerged from hidden bases. The aliens had never faced an enemy willing to strike at their heartland, but they adapted with terrifying speed. Enemy dreadnought approaching from bearing 27 Mark V, called out Torres. It's massive, Admiral. Twice the size of anything in our intelligence reports. The Zephyrian flagship was a monument to alien engineering, its hull bristling with weapons that could glass continents. It moved toward the human fleet with predatory grace, supported by dozens of escort vessels. All ships concentrate fire on that dreadnought, Rodriguez ordered. Everything we have. The space around Zeph Prime erupted into chaos. Human antimatter torpedoes slammed into Zephyrian energy shields while alien plasma beams carved through human armor plating. Ships died on both sides, their crews consumed by fire and vacuum. But humanity had learned something during their months of preparation: how to accept losses for victory. Every human captain knew they might not return home, and they fought with the desperate fury of a species facing extinction. The UES Retribution, Maria Santos aboard, closed to point-blank range with the alien dreadnought. Her planet-killer weapon punched through the enemy's shields and detonated deep within its hull. The explosion was visible from the surface of Zeph Prime. A new star birthed from hatred and antimatter. Dreadnought destroyed, Torres reported with grim satisfaction. But we're taking heavy casualties. We've lost 30% of the fleet. Rodriguez studied the tactical display, calculating odds and possibilities. The Zephyrian defenses were stronger than expected, but their orbital infrastructure was beginning to collapse. Shipyards burned in the void while defense platforms drifted as lifeless hulks. Phase 2, she commanded. Begin bombardment of the surface. What followed violated every human law of war, but humanity was no longer bound by the rules of civilization. Planet-killer warheads rained down on Zeph Prime, targeting military installations, government centers, and industrial complexes. The alien world's atmosphere lit up with the fire of artificial suns. Rodriguez watched cities burn from orbit, knowing that each explosion represented millions of alien lives. She felt no joy in the destruction, but no regret either. The Zephyrians had taught humanity this lesson when they murdered New Eden's children. Admiral, incoming transmission from the surface, announced the communications officer. It's on the standard diplomatic frequency. The alien face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything in human xenological databases. The being's features showed something humans had never seen from a Zephyrian: fear. Human commander, the alien spoke through a universal translator. I am High Patriarch Zexith of the Collective Council. We request terms for cessation of hostilities. Rodriguez studied the alien leader, noting the barely controlled panic in its large eyes. There are no terms, Patriarch. You chose genocide. Now you face the consequences. Our actions against your colonies were strategic necessities, Zexith protested. Your species' expansion threatened the stability of this galactic region. We sought only to contain. You sought to murder 200,000 innocent people, Rodriguez interrupted coldly. You succeeded. Now we return the favor. The bombardment continued while Zexith begged for mercy that would never come. Rodriguez had seen the recordings from New Eden, watched children die in streets while Zephyrian soldiers showed no emotion. Mercy was a luxury humanity could no longer afford, but victory came with an unexpected complication. As Zeph Prime burned, sensor operators detected massive hyperspace signatures approaching from the outer system. Admiral, it's the Collective's main battle fleet, Torres reported, his voice tight with stress. They've abandoned their attacks on our colonies and are returning home. 200 ships, maybe more. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The plan was working better than expected. The Zephyrian commanders had chosen to save their homeworld rather than complete their genocide. It was an emotional decision that would cost them the war. Signal all ships, she commanded. Prepare for the final battle. Today we finish what New Eden started. The approaching Zephyrian fleet was the largest military force the galaxy had seen in centuries, but it faced human warriors who had already accepted death, commanders who cared only for victory, and ships designed by a species that had learned to hate efficiently. As the two fleets closed for battle, Rodriguez thought of Captain Chen's final words from New Eden. We remember our dead. Today, the galaxy would learn what that meant. The Battle of Zeph Prime was about to begin in earnest, and when it ended, either humanity would stand alone among the stars, or the galaxy would burn in the fires of their vengeance. Rodriguez gripped the arms of her command chair and spoke the words that would echo through galactic history. All ships, attack formation. Today we teach the galaxy why you never threaten human children. The final battle for Zeph Prime began at 11:47 hours Galactic Standard Time and would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its dominion over the stars. Admiral Rodriguez watched the Zephyrian fleet approach through the burning debris of their homeworld's orbital defenses, noting the desperate formation of ships that had abandoned genocide to attempt rescue. Fleet composition analysis complete, reported Lieutenant Chen, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. 237 enemy vessels, including 12 super dreadnoughts. They outgun us 3-1. Good, Rodriguez replied, surprising her bridge crew. That means when we win, nobody will question our superiority. The human fleet had been reduced to 140 ships during the bombardment of Zeph Prime, but Rodriguez felt no concern about the odds. Humanity had learned something during their transformation from explorers to warriors. Numbers mattered less than will, and human will had been forged in the fires of New Eden's destruction. All ships, implement the Chessmaster Protocol, Rodriguez commanded, referencing the tactical doctrine they had developed specifically for this moment. The human fleet scattered into dozens of smaller groups, each moving independently through the debris field surrounding Zeph Prime. To the Zephyrians, it looked like panic, a desperate attempt to avoid annihilation. They were wrong. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the UES Retribution, led her squadron through the wreckage of a Zephyrian orbital station. Her engineering background had made her an expert at using environmental factors in combat, and the debris field was perfect for what humanity had planned. Enemy formation is pursuing us into the debris, her tactical officer reported. They're trying to corner us against the planet's gravity well. Let them come, Santos replied. Signal the fleet. Execute Chessmaster on my mark. The Zephyrian fleet advanced with the confidence of predators closing in for the kill. Their ships moved in perfect formation, energy shields glowing as they prepared to annihilate the scattered human forces. They had numerical superiority, technological advantages, and the righteous fury of defenders protecting their homeworld. They also had no idea what humanity had done to the debris field. Now, Santos whispered. Across the battlefield, human ships activated the surprise they had spent 3 hours preparing. Every piece of debris larger than a shuttle had been seeded with antimatter charges, turning the entire orbital region into a minefield of devastating potential. The explosions began as tiny flashes of light, but they cascaded quickly into something apocalyptic. Zephyrian ships found themselves surrounded by miniature supernovas as the debris field transformed into a storm of annihilation. Energy shields collapsed under the impossible assault, armor plating vaporized, and the perfect alien formations dissolved into chaos. Direct hit on enemy super dreadnought Sovereign's Pride, reported Torres from Rodriguez's flagship. Hull breach detected. She's venting atmosphere. But the Zephyrians were not finished. Even with their formation shattered and their ships burning, they fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction. Their surviving vessels regrouped and launched a counterattack that tested human resolve. The UES New Eden's Vengeance took a direct hit from an alien plasma lance, the beam punching through 3 decks and killing 40 crew members instantly. Rodriguez felt the ship shudder around her but maintained her position on the bridge. Engineering reports we've lost main power to forward. Weapons, announced the damage control officer. Then, we ram them, Rodriguez replied calmly. All ships close to knife-fighting range. Show these aliens what humans do when their backs are against the wall. What followed was the most brutal space combat in galactic history. Human ships, their elegant designs scarred by battle, grappled with alien vessels in close-quarters combat that violated every tactical doctrine. Captains who had been explorers and scientists months earlier now fought like berserkers, using their ships as weapons when conventional armaments failed. Captain Elena Vasquez, granddaughter of New Eden's chief engineer, rammed her destroyer directly into a Zephyrian cruiser, the impact creating a brief new sun as both ships' antimatter containment failed. Her final transmission was heard across the fleet. For New Eden's children. The tide of battle turned when Santos identified the Zephyrian command ship through its communication patterns. The alien flagship was heavily defended, surrounded by the strongest surviving vessels in their fleet, but it represented the heart of enemy resistance. All available ships converge on bearing 270, Santos broadcast. We cut off the head and the body dies. The final assault on the Zephyrian command ship became the stuff of legend. Human vessels, many of them damaged beyond any hope of repair, threw themselves at the alien defenses with suicidal courage. The UES Retribution led the charge, her hull glowing red-hot from absorbed energy weapons. Santos reached the command ship's bridge just as her own vessel began to break apart. Her final planet-killer torpedo, fired at point-blank range, punched through the alien flagship's armor and detonated inside the bridge. The explosion was visible from the surface of Zeph Prime, marking the end of Zephyrian resistance. "Enemy fleet is surrendering," reported Torres, his voice filled with disbelief. "All surviving ships are powering down weapons and transmitting surrender codes." Rodriguez looked around her bridge at the faces of officers who had aged years in the past few hours. They had won, but the cost was written in the empty stations where friends had once stood. "Signal all ships," she commanded. "Accept their surrender but maintain combat readiness. We're not finished yet." The aftermath of the battle revealed the true scope of humanity's victory. Of the Zephyrian fleet that had approached Zeph Prime, fewer than 50 ships remained operational. The alien homeworld burned beneath them, its cities reduced to glowing craters, its orbital infrastructure nothing but debris. But Rodriguez's greatest triumph came when long-range communications finally reached the human colonies. The Zephyrian fleets that had been attacking human worlds had received word of their homeworld's destruction and immediately withdrawn. Some had surrendered to colonial defense forces, others had simply fled into deep space. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Earth," announced the communications officer. "It's President Vasquez." The president's image appeared on the main screen, her face showing the strain of watching humanity's first interstellar war. "Admiral Rodriguez, the entire solar system is watching. What's your status?" "Zeph Prime is neutralized, Madam President. Their fleet is destroyed, their homeworld is burning, and their attacks on our colonies have ceased." Rodriguez paused, looking out at the debris field that had once been the heart of an alien empire. "The war is over. We won." The celebration that followed would echo across human space, but Rodriguez felt no joy in the victory. They had saved humanity by becoming something terrible, transformed themselves from explorers into exterminators. "Admiral," Santos had survived the destruction of her ship and now stood on the bridge of a rescue vessel. "What do we do now? The galaxy knows what we're capable of." Rodriguez studied the tactical displays showing other alien civilizations throughout the sector. Every species that had monitored the battle now understood that humanity was not the peaceful explorer race they had appeared to be. Earth's children could be genocidal monsters when threatened. "Now we make sure this never happens again," Rodriguez replied. "The galaxy has learned to fear us. Let's teach them to respect us too." As the human fleet regrouped above the ruins of Zeph Prime, Rodriguez began drafting the message that would reshape galactic politics. Humanity had announced its presence in the cosmos not with words of peace, but with the destruction of those who threatened their children. The galaxy would never be the same. 5 years after the Battle of Zeph Prime, Ambassador Sarah Kim stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Nexus Station, facing the assembled representatives of 43 alien civilizations. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of universal translators, every delegate waiting to hear what humanity's representative would say about the proposal before them. The proposal was simple: a formal treaty establishing humans as the galaxy's dominant military power, in exchange for protection of smaller civilizations. It was an offer no species could refuse because everyone remembered what happened to those who threatened human children. "Honored delegates," Kim began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "We gathered today not as conquerors and conquered, but as members of a galactic community that has learned the price of aggression." The Zephyrian delegate, one of the few survivors of their civilization, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The once proud species now inhabited a handful of refugee colonies, their homeworld still a radioactive wasteland that served as a monument to human fury. "The Terran Federation does not seek dominion over your worlds," Kim continued. "We seek only what we have always sought, the right to exist, to grow, and to protect our people. But recent events have shown us that this galaxy contains species who mistake kindness for weakness." The Valdorian representative, a being resembling a crystalline spider, spoke through its translator. "Ambassador Kim, your species' military capabilities are impressive. but many here question whether humanity can be trusted with such power. Kim smiled, though there was no warmth in the expression. Trust is earned through actions, not words. In the 5 years since Zeph Prime, how many worlds has humanity conquered? How many species has the Terran Federation enslaved or exterminated? The silence that followed was her answer. Despite possessing the most powerful military in the galaxy, humanity had expanded through diplomacy and trade rather than conquest. They had helped evacuate species threatened by natural disasters, mediated territorial disputes between alien civilizations, and even provided aid to Zephyrian refugees. But everyone also remembered the recordings from Zeph Prime, the images of human ships systematically destroying a civilization that had dared to harm human colonies. The galaxy had learned that humanity's mercy was a choice, not a limitation. The Terran Federation offers this compact, Kim announced, activating a holographic display that showed the proposed treaty terms. We will serve as guarantors of galactic peace. Any species that attacks civilians, engages in genocide, or threatens peaceful worlds will face human justice. In return, all member civilizations will have access to human technology, trade networks, and protection. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Some species argued for independence, others worried about human intentions, and a few brave delegates questioned whether any civilization should hold such power. The answer came from an unexpected source. High Patriarch Zexeth, the same Zephyrian leader who had begged for mercy as his homeworld burned. I have seen human fury, Zexeth spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of survivors' guilt. I have watched them destroy my civilization with the efficiency of a natural disaster. But I have also seen human mercy. He gestured toward the refugee camps where his surviving people lived. They could have exterminated us completely. Instead, they allowed us to rebuild, to learn from our mistakes. He paused, looking around the chamber at delegates who had witnessed the rise of human power. The galaxy needs protectors, Zexeth continued, and humanity has proven they can be both terrible in war and generous in peace. I cast the Zephyrian vote in favor of the compact. One by one, the other species followed suit. Even those who feared human power recognized that the alternative, leaving aggressive civilizations unchecked, was worse. The final vote was 38 in favor, 5 abstentions, and 0 opposed. As the treaty was signed, Kim thought about the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. They had started as peaceful explorers, been forced to become warriors, and now evolved into something new, the galaxy's reluctant guardians. The transformation wasn't complete, though. Back on Earth, massive shipyards continued producing warships that would patrol the spaceways between stars. Former colonies like New Moscow and Haven had become fortress worlds, their populations trained in both civilian professions and military arts. Humanity maintained the largest standing military in galactic history, ready to deploy overwhelming force at the first sign of aggression. But they had also become something else. Builders of a new galactic order based on the principle that civilization required both the willingness to fight and the wisdom to know when not to. Admiral Rodriguez, now retired but still consulted on military matters, watched the treaty signing from her home on Luna. The woman who had ordered the destruction of Zeph Prime felt satisfaction in seeing her strategic vision realized. The galaxy now operated under human protection, with trade flowing freely between species who no longer feared unexpected attacks. The memorial to New Eden stood in the center of Geneva, a simple black wall bearing the names of 200,000 colonists who had died to teach humanity about the darkness between the stars. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see it, reading the inscription that Rodriguez had personally chosen. They died as innocents so that humanity could live as guardians. Maria Santos, now heading the Terran Federation's technological exchange program, worked with alien scientists to develop new innovations that would benefit all species. The weapons factories on Titan had been converted to manufacturing medical equipment and terraforming technology, though everyone knew they could be retooled for war production within weeks if necessary. The change in galactic politics was immediate and dramatic. Aggressive expansion stopped overnight as species realized that human fleets might appear without warning to enforce the peace. Territorial disputes were brought to mediation rather than resolved through warfare. The refugee crisis that had plagued the galaxy for centuries ended as humans provided protection for displaced populations. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity itself. The species that had once dreamed only of exploration now accepted the burden of maintaining order across hundreds of star systems. They had learned that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy enemies, but in the wisdom to know which enemies deserved destruction. Captain Elena Martinez, commanding a patrol vessel in the former Zephyrian sector, exemplified this new humanity. Her ship, the UES Guardian's Watch, carried enough firepower to level a city, but she spent most of her time mediating trade disputes and providing disaster relief. The galaxy had learned to see human ships not as harbingers of doom, but as symbols of protection. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the Altarian colony ship Peaceful Journey," her communications officer reported. "They're experiencing engine failure in the Vortex Nebula." "Set course to intercept," Martinez ordered. "Maximum speed." As her ship jumped to hyperspace to rescue aliens she had never met, Martinez embodied the transformation of her species. Humanity had gained the power to burn the galaxy, but chose instead to light the way forward for all civilizations. The war that began with the destruction of New Eden had ended not with humanity's victory over its enemies, but with its acceptance of responsibility for protecting the innocent. The galaxy had burned in the fires of human vengeance, but from those ashes had risen something unprecedented, a civilization powerful enough to enforce peace and wise enough to choose mercy. In the end, the Zephyrians had been right about one thing: humanity was indeed a threat to the galactic order. They had simply failed to understand that sometimes the old order needed to burn so that something better could take its place. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, not through conquest but through the grateful acknowledgement of species who finally felt safe among the stars.